Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, Eskom has a brand new board, and it includes more people with engineering qualifications and backgrounds. That should lighten things up a bit, right? Well, not according to energy expert Ted Blom, who says the board is conflicted and should be dissolved. He joins me now to explain why he's doing this latest move by government. Mr. Blom, good morning, and thank you very much for your time. When I also saw the tweet, I was quite interested to find out why exactly you had concerns when many seem to have welcomed the decision to reconstitute the board. They've spoken of that they're suited and they have the requisite skills, but you're still saying it's concerning.
Yes, I'm still very concerned. Good morning to you and your viewers. I'm still very concerned because the three engineers that are on the board are not electrical engineers to the best of my knowledge. So what it seems to me that public enterprises doesn't seem to go into depth as to what the requisites of the board are. It's the same as saying that your GP is as good as a gynecologist or as a cardiologist or oncologist or something like that. We need specialist skills at Eskom to sort out the operational and running issues that confound them. So that's the one issue. On the other hand, there's also conflicts of interest. I'm aware of 3 conflicts of interest that are amongst the members of the board. So what does that mean? Well, they're in the same industry as Eskom, and they're fighting or they're batting for the other side, so to speak. So that's not a good situation to be in. I would have thought that whoever's on the board would have a fiduciary duty towards Eskom, and you can't serve 2 gods. You either serve the competitor or you serve Eskom. So there are three of those, and then on top of that, there's also some people who have been through at Eskom during the very difficult times of corruption with Medupi, Ngula, and Kusile, and they seem to not have had the guts to blow the whistle. So, no, I'm not happy with the board, even though it's early days, and normally one would like to give them some rope to sort of run and show their colors, but these conflicts show up immediately.
I don't know if you're a bit apprehensive to mention the names because it would give greater context. Are we talking here about Mpho Makwana insofar as him having been there before? Are you talking about Mr. Leroux when you speak of the conflict? Can you just give us more context as to who exactly you believe are those that are conflicted, who you believe lacked the courage of their conviction to actually stand up against capture or whatever corruption at the time? Can we just get the names so we can make a clear assessment of your position?
Okay, so I'm going to mention the 3 people. I don't want to mention the conflicts of interest. I think the people must self-identify. That's the right thing to do, and one should give them the opportunity to do that. But in terms of people that didn't blow the whistle, yes, you've mentioned 2 of them, and then the third one is Dr. Rod Crompton, who has been sitting on the NERSA board or NERSA panel for many, many years, and is aware of the corruption because it's been brought to his attention. I did it from 2009. So, yes, none of those 3 people seem to have blown the whistle or appeared before Zondo to explain the extent of the corruption that they were aware of at the time. Now, if they say they weren't aware of the corruption at the time, they're either being a little bit frail with the facts, or else they're not suited to be directors, because directors should be able to sniff what's going on in the organization, especially if everybody around them is crying about corruption.
When we speak of Mr. Crompton, he's the only one from the previous board who was retained in his position. I actually listened to an interview you heard a day or 2 ago where you actually went on to say, it seemed you were sympathetic with him and said that if you were him, you wouldn't have even agreed to serve on the new board with the current members. I don't know if you can give context on that particular position where you were concerned that the new team is fairly new and all of the other reasons you gave.
Well, yes. I mean, I would have thought that, to the extent that you've either been given a job and the job is not generalist. Eskom is, we're talking about Eskom being in the war room. You don't talk lightly and use terms like that very lightly. Eskom is indeed fighting for its life. It is in a death spiral. It is in a war room. It is full of corruption, still on at this day. In fact, in certain instances, I think the corruption is worse now than it's ever been in the history of Eskom. So, yes, to the extent that people haven't been appointed to portfolios or suggested portfolios, or the directors haven't been encouraged to take responsibility for certain areas of Eskom, I don't think we've got a fully functional board. I really think that Eskom deserve better at this stage, and South Africans deserve better if we are serious about turning Eskom around.
So you don't think we should give them an opportunity because we had a board before, and at the very least at this point, all we can do is support, and perhaps experts like yourselves would be called upon to support or even just encourage if you can?
Well, look, I mean, I think everybody that's a true patriot of this country stands willing to help when they're asked to help, or even volunteer. I volunteered in the past and I was not accepted, so that's fine. I don't have a problem with that because not everybody can volunteer and be accommodated. But the bottom line is that Eskom is not just a normal run-of-the-mill company. Eskom is the heartbeat. I repeat, the heartbeat of the South African and Southern African economy. And to the extent that you put a board up, the first thing I would have asked if I was a nominated member, for instance, is, am I the right person? Am I the best suited person to make this contribution? Am I an electrical engineer? Have I been appointed for my engineering skills? And do I have the requisite engineering skills? Am I maybe a civil engineer or
construction,
from construction engineer?
No, it's a very difficult one. I suppose you do raise legitimate points, but there could be others that would say that, well, you need different types of skills. It cannot just be the chemical or electrical engineering that they're looking for. We've seen there are also chartered accountants there. But another point that I listened to you make was that perhaps when they start, they should have been grouped and given a certain task to say you will be looking at transmission.
Portfolio,
yes, a portfolio of sorts where one looks at transmission, one looks at personnel. They're going to be vetting to see if they have the requisite skills insofar as the executive is concerned and personnel within generation. But you said that this is not happening and perhaps they should look into that to give them certain portfolios.
Well, certainly that was my suggestion, because when I was at Eskom all of 34 years ago, that's exactly what I did with my consulting team. I had an internal consulting team that I was leading up that consisted of 17 individuals, all postgraduates, and they were running around like chickens without heads, a jock of all trades. And I said, no, guys, if you want to really add value, you need to allocate yourself to a division and make sure you become a specialist in that division so that you know better than anybody else what's going on in that division. And the same thing goes, if Eskom's in crisis, I would have expected some sort of division of tasks to happen amongst the board members, that they need to roll up their sleeves rather than sit and wait and see what gets handed to them on a plate at board meetings. And it's very clear that the messages that have been coming from the organization to the board, to the CEO, to even the president and the minister, where they've all made gaffes in terms of giving false promises that the load shedding is a history and will never happen again in our lifetimes. Now, that message comes from the board. I mean, as much as the president likes to wander around the plant, the fact is he's not an electrical engineer, he's not a geologist or a metallurgist or a boiler engineer. He relies on what the messages that he's been given, and it's clear that the messages coming out of the organization aren't cogent with the condition of the organization. There's a mismatch or a break in communications or something, or maybe it's deliberate, maybe it's part of state capture that's still continuing. But certainly one of the ways to combat that is to let people go into portfolios and give them the responsibility and say, guys, you need to make sure that you're part of this portfolio. Let's say the generation portfolio. You're part of the generation portfolio. You need to go and go and have a look at that boiler audit that was done 3 years ago when we had 11 so-called specialists do an audit on all 90 boilers, which I think was anyway an impossible task because they were given 30 days, and there's no ways you can audit 90 boilers in 30 days, even if you divided the team up. So they've now got the time to do something like that. And I think it's time to really become focused on the problem and not just sit there for the money or for the coffee and tea. This is a board that's been appointed to do very, very difficult work. More difficult because of the breakdown in communications, more difficult because of the opaqueness of the organization and lack of transparency, and more difficult because you've got the livelihood of 60 million or 65 million people critically dependent on Eskom actually being able to deliver on its mandate. And currently it's not. Load shedding on a weekend is unheard of. It's never happened in 90 years of Eskom's history. Now suddenly it's an everyday occurrence. Boiler tube leaks shouldn't happen. You seal a boiler, it should be good for 40 to 60 years. What's the root cause? Why are the boiler tubes breaking down day in and day out? There are reasons for that. Now, I'm not an engineer, but at least I'm close enough to the action to know that there's something very, very wrong.
And honestly, our livelihoods do critically depend on their success. But hopefully they'll heed some of these calls and perhaps restructure and put the portfolios if they haven't already. But thank you very much for your insights this morning. That's energy analyst Ted Blom.